Всем привет! В этом году мне выпала
Hi
огромная
everyone.
честь открывать
This year
поэтому доклад
I can
будет
open
такой немного
defense
философский,
presentation,
немного
so
веселый. Я
it will
надеюсь,
be a
вам
little bit
понравится.
funny, a little bit like a
Если будут
mix
какие-то
of
вопросы,
philosophical
обязательно
and
их задавайте. За лучший
fun.
вопрос
So if you
у
have
нас
any
возьмет
questions,
прикольный вещественный
obviously
подарок,
shoot
и
away.
можно
I
указать, что
have
вы еще есть. Поэтому не
specific
стесняйтесь,
gifts for the best
обязательно
questions.
задавать вопросы по теме доклада. Можно в целом
And it doesn't have to be on the
какие-то более
topic.
абстрактные,
You
неровные
can
такие, как
just
этот доклад.
ask
Ну,
the
собственно,
questions in
давайте
general, just like this
примерно
presentation
20 лет
is. So
спустя.
here you can see it, it's
Соответственно,
20
я думаю, вы
alerts
догадываетесь,
later.
о чем
This
мы
is the
будем
name of the
сегодня
presentation, and I
разговаривать.
believe you
Просто
know
чтобы вы
what I
знали,
will be talking
ну, я
about.
часто про это думаю, когда вот
I always think
с
about this
коллегой с
when I look at the
какие-то
reports of my
инциденты, когда
colleagues
человек получает
from the
отчет,
incident
мы его
response team, when I
разрабатываем, все
go
такое.
through different reports,
И
when
каждый
we
раз
try to
ты задумаешься о
investigate this.
том, а
And every time
вообще,
you think,
почему
well,
вообще все это происходит?
why,
Ну, потому
why
что
does this happen?
сам killchain,
Like in
это ни
general,
для кого не секрет, он довольно длинный,
obviously
злоумышленники
the chain
много
is
чего,
pretty long and
соответственно, это все, что они используют,
malicious
хотя бы на
users
каких-то
use
этапах
quite a
жизненного
lot of
цикла атаки,
things, and all
оно
that
обязательно светится.
should
И как
be
бы вот этот
highlighted
вопрос
here. So
постоянно
this
висит
question
у меня в голове.
is
Я не то чтобы
always
часто
up
как-то
here in
слушаю
my
его
head, and
обсуждение, поэтому я решил, собственно,
I
с
don't
вами
think
сегодня
it is
про это
discussed
рассказать.
enough.
У
And
вас
that's why I
есть
wanted
много
to talk
такого с вами,
about
чтобы
it
это обсудить.
right here, right now, and maybe discuss it with
Собственно,
you
меня зовут Олег
after my
Скулкин.
presentation.
Я
So, my
руковожу
name is Oleg Skulkin.
подразделением внешней
I'm head
разведки.
of
Собственно, я занимаюсь
threat
threat
prevention,
intelligence,
intelligence
protection,
at
и
BI
attacks,
Zone. I work with
и external
threat
attack search.
intelligence,
Это, собственно, все мои продукты в Бизоне.
external management,
Я занимаюсь
search
их
attack,
развитием,
external
то
management.
есть я
I work
занимаюсь
with these
исследованием
different
кибербезопасности.
tools.
Разумеется,
I study different cyber
презентации наших
threats.
продуктов. Ну и, собственно,
And
мы в
since
том
threat
числе
intelligence is
о них с
one
вами
of our
сегодня будем говорить.
products,
Вообще, я больше
we'll be
14
talking
лет
about them.
занимаюсь всякими
I've been
веселыми
in this
вещами
industry for
и
about 14 years.
и реагированием на
Digital
инциденты,
forensics
участвовал в
and
разведке.
incident response and
Я
cyber
в свое
intelligence and
время,
so on.
скажем так, уже
A while ago,
этим
so to
обществом занимаюсь,
say,
написал несколько книг, часть из них
I
даже
wrote a number of
удостоились
books.
международных наград.
Some of them even got international recognition because originally they were published in English. I take part in different educational programs because I believe this is the key. The people are the key, and people have to be explained what and how it works. And if we do this, then we'll be able to prevent a lot of different attacks. I really like real, so to say, attacks. I believe we should take a look at the real potential criminals and what they actually use. Because we are not talking about theory, we are talking about practice. So we should study the real perpetrators. And obviously, blue teaming, when you know about the attacks of the red team, you don't have to go very deep into detection engineering. Maybe you have to check your tools and see if it can actually pinpoint potential attacks and mitigate them. And obviously, we have different things that Zeltzer challenge is one of the things. And the point is you study something every day and then you provide a mini report. And this time I had to get up at 6 a.m. just to publish it online. It was 142nd time this year. It is published both in English and in Russian. You can scan this Telegram QR code for my Telegram channel, and this is where I analyze different reports of my colleagues and colleagues from Russia, from other countries, and I take a look at different procedures, and I try to analyze them and see how we can use this for different hunting purposes. So since we're talking about real attacks, now let's consider who are hacked, who are being attacked. So suppose we do understand everything and maybe only the companies that are not protected are being attacked. But actually, this is not correct. We have quite a lot of major organizations which are being hacked, and we will try to analyze why this happens and what can we do with this. Okay, I will show obviously international examples, not local examples. I do believe you understand the reason why. And this is the attack we start from.
Nova Scotia Power.
Nova Scotia Power, it's a very big company. It's a Canadian company that takes 95% of its market. It's basically a monopoly on that market. And it has more than 500,000 clients. So what happened? On 28th of April 2025, the company reported that they discovered that it seemed that partially their information systems were some malicious users gained access to some of the parts of this infrastructure. Oh, obviously this happens, and they started to investigate this. And it turned out that quite a lot of personal data that were in their possession were compromised. As you can see, just a few days later, the next report followed, and then they started to work with third-party companies that helped them with this investigation. And it turned out that the organization was compromised back in March 19th, and they learned about it more than a month later, on 28th of April. During these about 40 to 50 days, the criminals were able to download a lot of personal data. So it was reported that the incident happened on 28th of April, but actually it happened on 15th of March. The criminals had quite a lot of time when they gained initial access. And obviously something had to be done with this, but even this big company, which paid attention to its information security, for some reason was compromised. Another example, Pearson. Pearson used to be in Russia. It's a British organization that works with different products. It has presence in more than 70 countries in the world. It's a very big company. And something similar happened here. In May 2025, they reported that it seemed that some of the personal data were leaked, but it turned out that once again, someone was not very good in configuring their information structure. The criminals were able to get the GitLab personal access token at Git, and they used it to gain access to the source code. And the source code had, obviously, a lot of data and materials which they used to get even more access to their information structure and get access to even more data. Obviously, they had information security, and still, this is the result. And finally, the Bybit, it's a crypto exchange. And obviously, you know about this. On 4th of February 2025, one of the developers uploaded a malicious Docker project. Obviously, we know the group who does it. It's the well-known Lazarus. Once they got access to this machine, they used their token to get further into the infrastructure. And here what very interesting things happen. Previously, they did not have details, but here they used ExpressVPN Obviously, those uncontrolled connections from different locations, usually you have to tag those, but they use this ExpressVPN. They also used user agent to connect. And I think, obviously, you can see from the title, the criminals didn't even want to hide their intentions. And finally, to work with the token of that developer was not very good, because they had to work during their working hours. They wanted to bypass multi-factor authentication and add their own device so that they could work 24/7 and they were not limited by his working hours. They were not able to do so. But still, they wanted to add a new device, and nobody really paid attention to this, which is very weird, so to say. And finally, once the attack went on and the criminals implemented the code, which later allowed them to have malicious transactions for $1.5 billion. They use Mythic. It's not Cobalt Strike, but still. And if we take a look at this very complex attacks with significant financial damage, still the criminals use this very simple and very well-known techniques and procedures. Still, they can be successful. So why does this happen? And we'll talk about this later. Now, let us go into more details with another example. It's an example connected to Russia, and see if those attacks are really such noiseless attacks. Maybe there are some things you can actually see around. And now let's test this hypothesis. There is a group, and I wanted to pick a specific group. This is Red Wolf. They have commercial espionage, and recently they started working with ransomware. We track them as Red Wolf. They also use Red Curl and Red Couple. So they have financial motivation, but they also have ransomware. They attack Russia, Ukraine, Canada, UK, Germany, Norway, Singapore, Australia, Hong Kong. And when we're talking about industries, usually those are aerospace industries and some research institutions, but they have different targets because this espionage is leaning towards commercial sides. They work with insurance companies, finance, transportation, tourism, and so on. If we're talking about the technical part, so this is very simple scheme, but still they use phishing emails to get initial access. In this attack, they used IMG file or ISO file. Then this file contained an uploader. They used a lot of PowerShell and RPivot to get access. So these are very popular tools. Well, obviously, RPivot is not very popular, but criminals use different tools, and basically it's the same. If they want to get remote access, like AnyDesk or PyRadmin or whatever, then they wanted to get authentication material. It's very simple. Obviously, it was not from GitHub. Obviously, it was not associated. It was Lazane. Then they used AD Explorer to collect information from the system. It's a legitimate instrument, but they used Snapshot, which allows it to use this tool without graphical interface and get all the necessary information. Next, to move around the infrastructure, they used Impacket, and this is a classical tool. And they actually add different tools WMI exec, SMB exec, and it's actually the same.
Followed by Terminator, which allows you, it's a protection of the EDR or anti-malware software shutdown tool. It's a popular story which we have heard about this year and last year. There's nothing new. And also the ransomware that they developed. And that note, the ransom note, was actually a funny one, selected out of a few. I don't really know why they used that ransomware, because they were mainly about the data. And just recently they started using it, and it seems like that they were not into any undermining activities, so they did not work professionally at all. It seems like that they just started changing their tactic in terms of monetization of their attacks. So overall, they're quiet ones, especially at some parts of the lifetime of the attack. If we take a look at the compromised attack, the incidents may stay on for a few months, they may stay on for 6 months, and quietly with the PowerShell they will launch recon commands that some files are available, and they will be creating malicious tags that shared files, so they work quietly and delicately. But if we take a look at their tools, we wanted to experiment with that, whether it's really possible to expose a few parts of the life cycle of the attack. For example, there was an AMG file initially, so inside that file there was a file which was disguised as a resume. They actually like this HR-related topic. When we just figured it out in 2020, there were phishing letters about you getting some bonus, getting a premium. They want to compromise just a few computers at once. So there was a very similar thing. It was disguised as a resume. So in actual fact, it was a completely legitimate executable file, which was DAP app, and it was for side-loading purposes. After that, the compromised system had the final payload with which the attackers continued to work. So if we take a look at how it's actually launching, there was this LM technique to have this run DLL that has this malicious library, but so this PCI-exe is unlikely. It's a very easy technique to use. So if we take a look at the malicious library, if we take a look at VirusTotal, it's not EDR, it's not any difficult protection tools. It's detected by
Причем, если посмотреть на результаты, в том числе реагирования на инциденты, можно увидеть, что в логах, соответственно, прекрасно это все видно, что антивирус обнаруживает, собственно, вредоносный файл, просто его не удаляет, потому что он настроен так, чтобы только обнаруживать. Ну и, естественно, никто особо туда не смотрит. Ну, он там что-то...
And nobody actually takes any look there. So there's something detected there. There's nothing horrible there. So if we take another example, our pivot, it's a legitimate tool for tunneling. It's quite possibly you see it for the first time because it's not used that frequently. Actually, I learned about it by reading one of the reports, which is about this particular group. But if we take a look at how it's actually detected, we'll see that it is highly unlikely that it's used in the legitimate infrastructure. So it's not a bad story to detect such a software. And also they try to obfuscate this. For the antivirus, it's a marker that there is something malicious going on. As far as you can see it here on the slide, it is easily detected too. So we'll take another look. Lazan, that's not Mimikat. I will not have this presentation with Mimikat, but I thought to add another slide that Lazan is not Mimikat. They used a more advanced approach here to get the material. It's simple. They also used a Python interpreter. It's not just a version that you can find on GitHub. When we speak about malware, ransomware attacks, it's the obfuscated version by attackers, so that it cannot be detected by too many antiviral software. But it was detected, as far as you can see here. It's not the fact that we can't detect it, but there's something else going on wrong. Let's try to find out what exactly. I'm talking not about EDR. There's nothing very advanced. It's just an ordinary antivirus software. And here is another example of Terminator. This tool was distributed on a popular Russian language shadow forum by an attacker with the nickname Spy Boy, and is designed to disable AV EDR. It's a simple thing, it's a simple tool, and you may be aware of this bring your own V driver technique, BYVD technique, so that they bring it up and disable the key processes. So this technique was used here. That's the anti-toolkit protection tool, and it's very often used by PC Hunter, for example. These are the tools in toolkit of any attacker who specializes in ransom attacks. There is nothing wrong about this driver, and that's the first impression, but a lot of antiviral software detects it quite well, because it's very frequently used by attackers. And we are not just talking about attackers who specialize in acquiring ransom. So the antivirus developers do this, and this is detected quite nicely with simple antivirus. That's what I've already said. So what's the point? Seems like that everything is detected, and these are not omnipresent solutions, but a very simple experiment proved when they started having it. After a while, seems like the problem is not that we don't have detection. We do have detection. The problem lies somewhere else. So we're going to start the fun part of the presentation. Anyway, like, what do you think the IT infrastructure looks like when it's already exposed? The first thing that we are checking out when we try the incident, it's the antivirus logs.
Кучу элементов жизненного цикла атаки. Обычно в логах антивирусного программного обеспечения
Normally, in the logs, there are plenty of alerts.
локальным специалистам, что
So the antivirus software would always prompt the users, hey guys, I alert you on this one and that one and that one, and it looks exactly like this. I'm giving you the alert. So most likely something has been deleted and you can ignore it. And I'm talking about the antivirus. And it does not only goes with the antivirus. I've seen lots of examples when the CM, EDR, and a bunch of all that stuff, when something is detected. But that's the false positive. Obviously, this can't be in our IT infrastructure. So very often, people can't actually work it out. Okay, the antivirus gives you some prompts and alert messages, but it's okay. There is a bunch of things going on, and I've seen a number of Babbitt attacks. There was an attempt to connect to a multi-factor authentication device. For example, you're in a cryptocurrency exchange and you're having this alert that someone is trying to compromise your system by, trying to reach with a certain device for authentication. The problems do exist, and you may have a different set of protection tools. You may have different antivirus software, but not every antivirus detects everything. But you don't have to detect everything. The life cycle of the attack is a long one. If you can detect a lot of this life cycle before the damage is done by hackers, that's more than enough. So, moving on. Why is this happening? So obviously there are protection tools that prompt you on something. Okay, there's a Trojan, there's generic R-pivot, whatever. But very often people check these alerts and they say, okay, there is an alert, but unfortunately it's not said that that's the ERP and it's used by Red Wolf and it spreads ransomware. You need to do something urgently, otherwise the attack will flourish and everything's going to go down. It's going to be bad. So they check the alerts. Hold on a sec.
Они смотрят в алерты, но
they check the alerts.
Там как бы вот примерно вот такие эмоции возникают.
And this is exactly the type of emotion you can see on their faces checking the alerts. Seems like that it's talking about something, but it speaks some gobbledygook. I don't understand this gobbledygook, so let's forget it. Forget it, just forget it. And that's exactly why it's happening like that, when you have plenty of alerts and nothing is done about them, because very often people lack this context and people don't understand what it's all about, so they can't take the right decision about the detected threats. Yet we have another problem. Some companies think that the main thing is a certain system. We have our personal data stored at this particular server, so I'm going to give this server a hug and I'm just going to sit with it. We have the EDR, everything is just good. SOC is actually monitoring that particular server. The rest of the infrastructure is just not covered. So let's cover that, and 90% of the remaining infrastructure, it's nothing. There are a couple of guys that are doing something about the encryption, but it's not that important. So the story goes, the hackers get access to the unprotected part of the infrastructure, but when they get to the key systems, they already have privileges and they have everything to complete the attack, and they can't actually react to alerts. And if we're talking about malware spreading and it shuts down the protection system with the terminator, it would be too late. That's not that useful. So very often incidents occur just for that particular reason. That's one of the key reasons that very often it would be very difficult to cover all of the incidents. If you have a rich IT infrastructure, covering everything is quite impossible. So that leads to other incidents, even in the high-profile companies. Yet we have another problem. The hackers, the attackers, may arrange the attack in a different way. And some people say, oh, we know how we're going to be attacked. We have got the key systems. We have our CEO here. We have the CFO, they will be attacked, and our main developer is also likely to be attacked. And there are some other people with their RDP, with the locker. They don't really set the priorities right. So there is the unprotected part still available to the hackers. Or, for example, if new supercritical issues are fixed, but they don't actually take a look at the real ones used by malicious users, and they ignore the real ways hackers employ, and that leads us to incidents. And yet another very important thing, it very often happens that everyone is trying to focus on detection. I've shown you a bunch of examples with the virus Total and the things that the malicious users employ. As far as detection, it goes simple. People, however, say, we need more. Maybe we have some rules. Maybe I have some indicators of the compromised events. We need indicators, we need alerts, we need to collect all of the information. We need to detect. We have to. And very often they may have quite a lot of protection tools. And these protection tools generate a bunch of alerts. But here we are going back to the first slide, when there are plenty of alerts and it's pretty challenging to work and handle the alerts. Handling the alerts becomes impossible at a certain point. So that's where the problems start. So you don't always have to focus on detection engineering. If you need to detect something, you need to take a look at what is not going to be detected for obvious reasons. Very often they use absolutely legitimate tools, so the detection would be very difficult to create because you're going to have quite a lot of false positives. There is this threat hunting technique. So if we really like to detect something which is not going to be detected by the protection tools you possess, it's best for you that you spend your resources to do that. Like I said in the beginning, there's this story. We are checking whether our protection tools may detect the hackers' malware. It's a useful practice. Instead of trying to come up with the rules that the EDR creators must write, and they should do that. Instead of that, you have to check it out, whether it's detected in the first place, and you don't have to embark on that. Especially, it's important for those companies that have a lot of protection instruments in place. So basically, I would like to summarize. So speaking in terms of information security tools, I can assure you that information security tools are quite effective. The antivirus is effective. Any security tools is quite effective. Yes, it can be bypassed, that's true, but the chances that the hacker will bypass all of them and you won't see anything during the life cycle of the attack is quite low. So, you don't need to focus too much on detection. You need to learn what they are prompting you about. So knowing the nature of the modern attacks, you can arrange the protection tools in a proper way and use resources for proactive threat hunting and security testing. Don't focus too much on detection. If you can detect some of the stages of the attack, for that simple reason that your security tool is not that efficient is not a big problem, but you need to understand at which phase it is actually happening, because the main thing is that you have to prevent the damage that could be done by the hacker. When they try to collect the data about their whereabouts and try to put their roots in the infrastructure, these initial phases of the attack are plenty. So if there is a technique which is about discovery, there is nothing wrong about it, because there are plenty of such techniques applied by the hacker, and it's not that bad. But remember that if you see some attempts like that, maybe you should take extreme measures already. And like I said, if you have some legitimate tools and if you have some undetectable malware because it's too difficult, it may actually help that you invest resources there. And you invest it there if you have this coverage and it's detected quite well. What's the point to do this detection engineering? And the main thing, how we're going to battle all these problems. Most obviously, they are about ignorance about the way the state-of-the-art cyber attacks are arranged. And for that simple reason, it's pretty difficult to interpret the prompts and alerts of your security tools. Please take a look at how the real malicious users operate and set the priorities right. Hunting, detection engineering, that's where you need to make sure that you detect exactly what is used by the users these days in terms of vulnerability management, and you need to eradicate the vulnerabilities used by hackers these days. The same applies to configurations. The malware users, malicious users, don't use the bunch of things, but they are limited by a number of tools that they know well, because they are people, they don't want to stress themselves and learn too much. They would like to quickly arrange the attack with the maximum outcome and profit. So basically, we need to make sure that our infrastructure looks like this. Here is the house of the fourth piglet, which is made up of the skulls of the wolves. The skulls are not that strong, that they really show a very, very straightforward message. They convey a very clear message to the hackers. I wish you all success and that your infrastructure looks exactly like that picture. And I'm done. Thank you very much.
Можно вопросы позадавать.
Now you may ask questions if you like.
Занимается. Вот, сейчас к вам подойдет.
Who's going to come up with a microphone? There is the lady with the mic.
Здравствуйте. Спасибо за доклад, был очень...
Hello, thank you very much for your presentation. It is a little bit obvious, but here is a question. In your presentation, you raised a few problems that people simply don't understand the alerts.
Некоторые средства защиты
And some protection tools may
некоторые легитимные процессы, что
misdetect some legitimate processes, which is a pain. Is there a future of learning to use the intelligence to avoid these problems? Thank you. Well, in actual fact, it's already used, but you may want to understand that that machine learning and LLMs, they don't analyze. If talking about artificial intelligence, you need to spend less time on the analysis, but it's proven that it does not remove all of the problems. And the state-of-the-art protection security tools do include AI assistants. that they can prompt you about there's something really going on wrong. And such tools, like we can see it on the alert, are used. They're not used. They do help us with that, but you can't guarantee it 100% because they need to be trained. You need to provide some materials so that they learn using something. And the hackers are also trying to adapt to that. With the use of different tools, the hackers find another legitimate tool that they didn't use before. And your AI assistant may also be unaware of that new tool. So what are you going to do? Either you need to use threat intelligence or just take a better look around for how this tool has been used previously, whether it's a legitimate activity or not. Thank you. May I ask you another question?
Решите вопрос. Ага.
Там прямо у нас это? Окей. Давайте еще один тогда.
Олег, вопрос.
One more question and that's it, because we have to stick to the schedule. Yes, I'm here with the final question. In your presentation, you mentioned the attribution of the hackers groups. You mentioned 3 different names. What did we encounter? We do develop our system, which is going to be used just across the board in the country. So we saw that the Bison has one attribution, Kaspersky has a different one, etc. So the question is that they all have different attributions. Would that be possible across all of the Russian Federation? The companies and the regulator authorities come up with the uniform attribution system, so that it becomes much simpler for us to analyze. The problem here is that we give this information, we get this information, we put it in the database, we get it from Bison, then we get it from Kaspersky, we take it, we analyze it, we have a few operators working. We have to run this data through 2-stage verification. Seems like it's an obviously simple solution. What do you think about this? In the West, they think it's highly unlikely to happen. The clusters names, there was a clear example. A few names, and there is too many unique things just to say that that cluster box is just the one. At the early stages of clusters formation, we can see an elephant's leg or head of the elephant, another elephant's foot. So when we set up this cluster, initially it's very hard to say what's exactly there. Sometimes we glue the 2 clusters together. We have a bunch of data and then we realize it's just the same. So it will ultimately lead to yet another taxonomy. But making sure that everyone uses just one solution is impossible. I don't believe it. And in the West, they think that it's not applicable. I think any threat intelligence product is to collect this information. We have a free of charge version of the portal. We collect the names and we know how we call someone and get some alternative namings. It's simple. I got it. So it seems like you don't see such a possibility, at least in Russia. You can, of course, introduce it, and everybody will use this as an alternative one. And it's not going to be 15 names, but 16 rather. As for the rest, I'm not sure. I don't believe it. I don't believe it's possible. Is it high time for us to wrap it up? If you would like to ask a quick question, then you may do so. It's a SOC-related problem, because there may be plenty of sources of events, lots of alerts. So where do you think we'd better go do the smart filtration
Тут зависит от того, что
or
ты можешь обнаружить.
do
То
a
есть
few
у тебя
sources of
будет проблема
events.
того, что у тебя
It
разные
depends.
источники будут дублировать.
It depends on the different sources. So you have to take a smart approach.
Берут какую-то экосистемную историю. Я вот не буду никого рекламировать и расскажу про CrowdStrike. Вот у них есть Falcon, это как бы история, где там и EDR, и НГФВ, и все вместе, короче.
And they have different things. There's an RNGFV, so you get from one system, you get everything from it. And the same happens here. You take information from all the sources where you base your decisions on. So you have telemetry. What do you want to find using this telemetry? Not just, well, I have this part, and I want to assemble them together. This is not a very good example. When we're talking about purple teaming, and when we test some kind of technique or tool, we need to understand why exactly we need to do this. If you lack telemetry, then you need more telemetry, and then you need to understand what kind of telemetry you need. Maybe you already have this. Maybe you need to have an additional tool which is like surrounding telemetry. So you have to start with what you need. You do not want to start with multiple different sources. Like you start with legacy, then you add LiDAR, and you have a lot of sources of telemetry, but you have no idea why you need this. So you have to start with why, what and why you need, and you start there, what kind of data from what kind of sources you want to get, and then you need to understand why you need this data.